Thanks everybody for coming to the Brain Dump. We're going to do something a little bit different than what you've been seeing so far here at the Leadership Summit. My name's Richard Rouse. I'm a game designer, writer, director, consultant, etc. I worked at Surreal Software in Seattle years ago. Since then, I've worked everywhere from Ubisoft to Microsoft. I'm now working on an independent project, infiltration game with a procedural narrative, but I haven't announced that yet, so enough about that. This is sort of inspired by the micro talks that happened at GDC. I talked to Richard Lemarchand about those years ago, and he gave me some tips on how he runs them, and I've run them at a bunch of different conferences since then. The basic idea, it's sort of inspired by like Pecha Kuchas, too, if you know those. But the basic idea is that we got a bunch of interesting speakers up here, and they each give a 5-minute talk that they're passionate about something in game development. And we've lined up a pretty good diverse range of speakers here from different places in the industry and different specializations. And this is the part where I usually embarrass them with pictures I've grabbed off of Facebook, but I decided not to do that this year. Oh wait, sorry, I totally meant to delete that slide. So this is the theme, though, that we're all working from this year, is the hardest thing in game development. Which can be very specific to different people. You know, when I often think of how hard it is to ship games, even after all the ones we've done over the years, I compare it to Marv locked in a cage in the first SimCity graphic novel, Sin City, not SimCity, totally different IP, where he just rams his way into that door like 100 times until it finally busts open. But surely there must be a better way than that. So we've lined up a bunch of interesting, abnormal, in a good way, brains to come up here and tell you their own techniques. So with that, our first speaker is Sheri Graner. I hope I have pronounced that correctly. She is something of a legend in the industry. She has been working since Ultima 7 and 8 way back when. Since then, she's done everything from Star Wars Galaxies to Nancy Drew to some games my kids have played, like Daniel Tiger. And she now owns her own studio, Zombie Cat Studios, in addition to being the director of games and production at Big Noise Games. I think if you're a director of games and production, that's sort of like, that's everything, right? Yeah, okay, great. So with that, here's Sheri.
Slides. Trying to get my slides up here. Go. No, wrong direction. Ha! Okay, I'm going to talk about the hardest thing about. I took this as kind of the end of the conference rant kind of thing, so this is not terribly serious. So, hardest thing about, and I took it to be game design, not game production, because I am a game designer. So. Hardest thing about game design, it's not exactly what you think. Here's a day in the life of a game designer. This is something I face every day. Anytime I talk to anybody about being a game designer, everybody wants to know, you program? So what do you do? And it comes a lot different from different people. So when I talk to my family to this day doesn't really understand what exactly it is I do. They think somehow I just, play with games all day and I do something about them. So as many of you all know, I wrote the book Gender Inclusive Game Design, Expanding the Market. And that came out about 7 years ago now. I've been in the game industry since 1989, so it was quite a while between when I started and when the book came out. The book came out, my parents got a copy of the book, and I was working at Sony Online Entertainment as a content lead on Star Wars Galaxies, and the phone rang at my desk, and it was my dad, and he said, Sheri? And I said, hi, Dad. He says, your mother and I have read your book. Right. Okay. He says, and we've come to a decision. Okay. What is it, Dad? He says, we have decided this is going to be your career. It only took them 15 years to come to terms with the fact that their daughter was a game designer, and they still really had no idea what it was I did. Oop, away again. To this day, my friends still think what I do all day is play games. They friends that have been my friends since I started in the industry, and they still, every time something comes out or does, I say, wasn't that cool? I bet all you do all day is they play games. So my friends still think all I do all day is play games. My teams that I work with as a designer, they think all I do is change my mind all day on what should happen in the game. There's we have all this kind of this culture now in the game industry of iteration and changing the game and changing design and changing what we're doing quick and fast. What people don't realize, what they don't think about, is when you change the game design, it's the head of the snake. So when you change the game, it rumbles all the way through. So somebody who's been working on something down toward the middle of the snake, when we change our design up at the front, it's going to change what they do, and they've probably done quite a bit of work on where they're going. But design iteration is the head, and it's where we start. And it's not always just us changing our mind, although we seem to have that as a reputation. The CEO seems to think somehow game design is about generating money, particularly in today's games with these metrics-driven games, and they seem to think that game design is all about pumping out that money and making that player continue to produce money for them. And everybody thinks they can do my job. Everybody. And we haven't helped that any. Part of what's the problem with this is we actually have added to this. We now use games to teach kids about how to program. We have summer camps designed for little kids. Come and learn to make a game. Games have gone mainstream. We have television commercials with games now. We see pictures and posters. Everybody knows everything about games. We have Girl Scout patches where you can go win a patch in Girl Scouts for designing a computer game. We have tools that are available off the shelf for everybody to make the game, and everybody thinks they can design a game. How do I know this? When I get on an airplane, I have to decide how social I want to be. If I'm not feeling particularly social, when the person sitting next to me asks me what I do for a living, I tell them software management. Because frankly, if I tell them I'm a game designer, I'm going to have to listen to the entire flight about either the games their kids play, how games are involved in the connection to violence, or even worse, heaven forbid, they have a game design idea. Because by golly, they're going to spend the entire flight telling me their game design idea. And you know what? Here's the best deal. If I'll make the game for them, they'll split the profits with me.
I got that opportunity. 50%, what a deal.
Yeah, it's a deal. Yeah, I'll send them to you. So what do I do exactly? Well, game design is actually a very complex, very diverse field. I think it's one of the few fields where a liberal arts degree really helps. By the way, I do have a liberal arts degree. You have to know literature, psychology, military history, military theory, regular history, statistics, probability, mathematics, how to use spreadsheets in every particular way you can possibly think of using a spreadsheet. You have to know about economics, world economics, and yes, you have to know a little bit about code and how it works. So design is not easy. It's a big, broad field, requires a lot. So really, what I do for my friends and my family, I design that interactive entertainment that you can play together with your friends, together with your family members, and you can have a good time. For my team, I use their tech in ways they have never even thought of to create fun. And for my CEO, I build experiences that keep the players in the game and keep them playing. But for myself, game design for me is a challenge, and I have my own metagame that I play. My game is, can I design the best game for whatever audience it is that I'm designing for? Whether I'm designing for health, whether I'm designing for teaching, whether I'm designing for the people in the nursing home, or whether I'm designing for myself or for my hardcore audience that I play with, I want to make sure that what I'm designing is the best game they've ever seen. So can anybody learn to design games? Sure, anybody can go to a class and take a class and get an A on game design. But can anybody do it well and take your players away to a world far away and take them out of their little cramped game room in front of their PC and their bowl of Cheetos and do it well? No, not hardly. Thank you.
Excellent. Next up, we have a man who may need no introduction, but I'll do it anyway. He has been making some of our most memorable game music for some years. You probably know him from his work in Halo and Destiny. You may not know that he also authored the Flintstones Kids jingle, which Leah can sing on cue. There, see, perfect. He has recently started up a new company with some old colleagues called Highwire Games. I give you Marty O'Donnell. This thing works. Oh, sorry.
Well, hello. All right, 5 minutes, huh? this is a very serious talk, so laughing is not a good idea because it will eat into my 5-minute time limit. I am talking about the most difficult thing in games, in my opinion, which is creative collaboration, putting teams together that will creatively collaborate. So, first of all, yes, my name is Marty O'Donnell, and I am a creative collaborator. And this is an example of 3 guys who were doing music together, and we worked on Destiny. So, most video game development needs teams to create what we're creating. And so we need a mixture of intense, talented people who are working together in order to be able to create entertaining and engaging experiences. Now, you should also notice I have great PowerPoint skills because these pictures took a lot of time to come up with. The first thing I'd like to do is talk about some ideals or what I would say. A lot of people might say these are fantasies about what creative collaboration is. So here's a few things I want to at least address first. One is the idea that you've heard it said that 2 heads are better than 1, and that makes a lot of sense, and that's one of the chief ideas behind collaborating. But it really depends on what the heads are, so just be careful about that. And then there's another ideal, which is the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. And that works most of the time, but if the chemistry of the individual parts sucks, it's not going to give you what you want. And then the final thing that I want to talk about is the importance of team. And of course, there is no I in team. Or is there? Yeah, see? Now how was that? Did you see that come on and the whole thing? Yeah. And of course, you know that you cannot spell team without M and E. All right, so what we're talking about here are the ingredients on a team that I think make the best creative collaboration work. And I would say these are some realities that I think we need to keep in mind. And the first one is that bland food is uninteresting. So what you want are recipes that have strong, and this is the important part, but complementary flavors. So, and there are individual flavors that need to be strong, but if they complement each other, you have a great recipe, great tasting food. And this particular taco actually contains corn fungus, so I'm sure it tastes great. Anyway, so for creative collaboration to work at its best, you have to have really strong, individual, talented people. And these are people who could create something completely on their own, but have decided to pull together to make something amazing that they couldn't make on their own. And I thought it would be sort of fun to do a little brainstorming here and make up a team of amazing individual talented people that could be a game design team for us, a game company. So we're going to start with Isaac Newton, of course, doing engineering, that's for sure. Followed by, now this is a good one here. I thought this was great. Frederick Douglass. I mean, talk about someone who's just, who knows, design. Wouldn't that be amazing? Of course, Rembrandt for art, Jane Austen for writing, and followed up, of course, by Beethoven for the audio and the music. And I mean, just try to imagine this group. What kind of game, if they were truly working together, would it be? Besides having an audio director who was deaf, I think we got a really, really amazing team. Now, where it gets hard is when you have a team that has people with very complementary talents. So, for example, let's say your music team was Beethoven, of course, and Mozart, okay, and Wagner. So try to imagine that team. You can definitely see that maybe that's too much of a good thing. But remember what I said before, that the most important thing is the complementary aspect, okay? So these are people that have to work together in a complementary way. And to me, this has more to do with the attitude of the team members than it does just trying to fit together puzzle pieces or find the people with the right abilities. It's all about the individual attitude. And so that is going to come from insightful leadership that creates a really safe place, has no fear, And now this is the important part. The team members actually have to wholeheartedly agree with the following two statements. Number one, I trust the people on the team and they can trust me. And number two, I believe that what I would create by myself will not be as good as what we will create together. Now, these are really important. People really have to believe this. So there, in putting together a team or being on a team or leading a team of creative collaboration, there's a couple things to watch out for. Number one, what happened to this one? Oh, I had a picture there, doggone it. Anyway, the first thing is passive-aggressive people. I had a funny picture with a person with a mask and whatever it was. It wasn't that funny, but it was passive-aggressive. So do not let those people on a team, okay? No matter what, they will say they agree with those two statements that I just said, but they're lying. They actually don't. So if you know that they're passive-aggressive, they have to be completely not on any team at all. They shouldn't even be in your company. And then, of course, bullies. Bullies are the worst, okay? And you know who they are. Find them and kill them, okay? And then, of course, by the way, once the lawyers get involved, it's over. I mean, really, really over. So, okay, the final thing is, let's see. There's one final question that you might have here, and that is, how can you tell if a team is really successfully collaborating? And the way you do that is by you pay close attention to what they produce. And if they're producing golden eggs, which is what you're looking for, remember, be nice to the goose. Thank you very much.
All right. Next up, we have Samantha Kalman. She is a designer and programmer with a background at Unity and Amazon. She just recently shipped her very first game from the independent studio Timber Interactive. Did I pronounce that right? Maybe not. The musical. Recently crowned the undisputed champion of the PAX Rumble. And if you don't know what the PAX Rumble is, well, that's probably okay.
Sticking to my 5 minutes, I'm going to start my timer now. I'm Samantha. It's really nice to see everyone here. I am, as Richard indicated, an indie, which to me means independent. I founded Timber Interactive. That was pretty hard. I built a prototype for Centris, which was pretty hard. I demoed it at the Seattle Indies Expo. Pretty hard to do. After that, the game sort of got this warm reception in enough of a way that I felt like it was the right thing to take it to a Kickstarter. So I designed and executed a Kickstarter fundraising campaign for $50,000. That was really hard to do. To rally 1,500 people and ask for their money is like incredibly difficult from an emotional, like psyche perspective. But also exhausting physically to be doing so much constant emailing and talking. After it was successful, I got back to work and had to stop thinking about marketing. That was really hard. And then I did a green light, and then I shipped to early access, and I hired contractors, and I managed them, and shipped this game in many different prototypes and different forms, alpha, beta, all the way to release. So there are so many stages along the way of creating my first commercial game that were incredibly difficult. I could call any of them the hardest thing I've ever done, but I'm not going to. I'm actually going to point to something that I consider to be the actual real hardest thing in game development, and that's this. Pardon me for using the A word, but games as art is something that we talked a lot about for a while and have stopped, and I'm wondering if there's more to say. throughout all the conversations, throughout all the work to build this thing that to me was very personal as an art project, but then perceiving a value in it that could be extended to enrich people's lives and to speak to them in a very real way, I had to think about that in terms of business. And I had to think about aspects of the positive creativity and also the game as a product, like a thing meant to generate money and business and sales. And I had to think about how to pay my contractors, how much to pay them, and like how do we do this? So the point that I want to make today is that there is a line there's a line in all games and all game creators that falls somewhere between art and business. And it's going to be different for every single person. If you're only focusing on the business, that means you are probably looking at what's trendy and popular and what works, and shamelessly copying that. And there are a lot of companies out there that do that. If you're only making art, if you're only thinking about your work as art, then you are creating sort of as you go, making it up as you go along, and you're saying, well, some of these trends and these standards don't apply. And there are a lot of people doing that too. If you look on places like itch.io and game jams, you're seeing a lot of games that are not in a commercial place at all. They're freely available, and they may be very small, but they are works of art. They may be rough, they may be polished, but they're not business focused. So the hardest part about making games is finding where on this spectrum that you fall, because it's going to dictate how you move through the project. As I've now looking back on Centris as it's finished, I see that Centris is probably just maybe 10% to the right of the middle. I consider it more of an art project than a business project, but I put a lot of business thinking into it. At the end of the day, it is more of an art project than a sort of crafted product, and that means that it has a smaller potential audience. But the number of people in that audience, or 100% of the people in the audience, have a passionate feeling about the game. And that's most important to me. So that's what I want to leave you with today is, where do you fall, and what's important to you about making games? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Samantha. Now everyone will have to answer that question before they begin talking. So next up we have Leah Hoyer. She is a narrative director who I had the great pleasure of working with at Microsoft, where he worked on things like Quantum Break and Sunset Overdrive and another game we can never tell you about. She is now head of narrative over at ArenaNet, where they're just wrapping up the first major expansion to Guild Wars 2, which is called Heart of Thorns. Did you come up with that name yourself?
I shepherded the process.
Great. See, that's a good narrative director answer. All right, I give you Leah Hoyer.
I'm also bringing up my phone so I can stay on time. Let's see. And I'm going to do this because I walk around a lot. All right. Ooh, goodness. So before we get started with the what is the hardest thing about games, I actually want to talk about something I found absolutely awesome about games. About 2 years ago, I was the head of narrative at Microsoft Studios, and the central media department was making these videos, sort of informing the various game partners that we were working with what it is that all the different creative teams did. And I want to share a snippet of our video with you.
It's a great feeling to come to work and know
it's
that
low.
you're creating something that ideally is going to entertain people and let them have a good time.
We don't have fans, we don't have people who love those things. We don't have a real reason for existing. And so we want to hit them in as many different ways and give them the content that they're excited to use in fresh, innovative ways that take story and take character and put them with the technology and marry those in ways that feel compelling and immersive. I'm really lucky that that gets to be a part of what I get to do for a living. It's really a dream come true.
happy. So why am I putting that in this talk? I was given the cut of this video to review. The very next day, I was informed that Central Creative Services were no longer going to be a part of the Microsoft business model. And my entire team of narrative and editorial professionals, awesome people, I loved them, each and every one of them, was disbanded. Hey, that's my story. But I suspect every single person in this room can relate to it on some level. If you've been in the games industry for any small amount of time, you've probably had your game killed, your studio shut down, that feature that you've worked 18 months on was just pulled from the game. Or maybe like me, I was actually one of the lucky ones. Like, I was just part of a reorganization, but my new job wasn't something that made me as excited as the things I was talking about in there. Everybody on my team dealt with that whole thing in a different way, but we all went through similar stages. So today I wanted to kind of talk about some of those stages and some of the things that we learned, because maybe you're going through this right now, and if not, there's a good chance you will be at some time soon. So first off, you're gonna have to wallow. Okay, we're human. You are absolutely going to do that. We went out, we had margaritas, and we made Microsoft pay for it. Yeah, $200 bar bill. Take that, Microsoft. But what you hope you ultimately get out of this is the fact that at the end of the day, it's not about you. You're going to go through that process, and eventually you're going to realize, you know what, there were some business decisions made, and whether you agreed with them or not, it's not because you're not a person who's worthy to be in the game industry. It's not because there's not a place for you to do something awesome in our industry. So eventually you get to this space where you have to do a gut check. Because you know what? That hurt. And there's a really good chance that you're going to get hurt again. And it may be the case that, hey, you were doing that last thing for so long that your skills are a little out of date. Or there's a great job, but you're going to have to move cities for it. And at some point, you're going to have to talk to yourself and say, wow, am I passionate enough about this industry and about making these things that I'm willing to do the sorts of things that I want to do to keep me in this industry, to keep me viable, to find that next awesome role in the industry that I would like to have? Some people on my team said no. And they're doing something different right now, and that's totally okay. Honestly, it's not for everybody. But assuming that it's for everybody in this room, at that point, the next step is you are absolutely going to get your feelers out. You are going to network like crazy. And here's the thing I will say that right now everybody can be doing to help for the next eventuality. And it's not just about networking. It's about being a good person. And I will say, regardless of the level that you are at in your company or the level you would like to be at, treating the people that you work with respect and creating a great environment for those people has such an impact on the creative output, and it will absolutely have an impact on your ability to bounce back later. Treating people nicely doesn't mean you're soft, it doesn't mean you're weak, it doesn't mean, like one former coworker who I had, that you're a woman. That's a different topic, so I'll put that on the side burner for a moment. But, it's just about doing the right things. I actually got recommended to the headhunter for ArenaNet from one of the people who got laid off from my team. Because you create a good environment, you're nice people, and we all know there are people out there you would, because of the way they worked with you, you would totally recommend them for a job. And there are people who, hell no, right? Which one do you want to be? Okay, start being that person now if you aren't already that person. And then at some point, you are going to land that awesome job again. And the last thing that I want to leave people with is we really do need to innovate. We are an industry of innovators, but I'm not talking just about innovating your own career, innovating that next thing in that next game that is super awesome. But I would love for us all as leaders, whether we are current leaders or future leaders in this industry, to start innovating on this problem. Because making games is hard, we know that. It's unpredictable, we know we're always trying to make that next best feature, that next awesome thing. But there are ways that we can get in. We can be better about planning for making that. We can be better about making tough decisions early before people get super excited about something and invest 2 years of their life in it. We can make better about not hiring 500 people for a game that ultimately takes 80 people to make. Because if we want to both attract and keep the most talented people in this industry, we're going to have to eventually be able to break this cycle. Thank you very much.
All right, thanks. So next up, we have Dima Veryovka. Have I tried to pronounce that correctly? He is an accomplished artist and designer. Previously, he worked at the dearly departed Zipper Interactive on SOCOM and MAG and things like that. Most recently, he worked on last year's beautiful BAFTA-nominated and winning game, Never Alone. I give you Dima.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you, guys. So, in my opinion, the hardest thing about game development is actually to find meaning in our work. Because we all know that making games is hard. It's truly like we spend so much time at work, and it's so many people working together. It's like, you know, so many times you're calling your wife and saying like, nah, I'll be late. And when you start to analyzing that on average, the relevancy of the video game is not that long. Like it's really like people get very excited at the very beginning, and then after a year, people start kind of like forget about the game because a lot of new games coming out. And my biggest question, why do we work so hard on something that lasts not that long? Like to me, it's like 2 years of development for something is just on average. I'm not saying all the games like that. It's a lot of other games that really last for a long time, but on average, not that long. So, and I'm looking at the pictures because my background is I'm a fine artist, and I always wanted to be an artist, wanted to be in the galleries, and I'm looking at that and like, how come what Picasso or Van Gogh or Giacometti, any kind of big masters, what they knew that we don't? How come they create something 100 years ago and we still admire their work? We go into museums, we go somewhere and like talking, mentioning their names, buying their posters. What did they do that we don't? And I'm looking at these images. For designers, we wanted to see people like that. That's like the emotion we're trying to kind of elicit from people. And yeah, it's fun. Like if I would show the image like that, like people having fun. But in my opinion, it's like very easy to draw out the emotions like that. It's like very temporarily. It's kind of like it's fun, and then it's like goes down. After 5 minutes, you're asking, how was it? Yeah, it was fun, but not more than that. I strongly believe if we put like a big ideas and try to elicit like a bigger feelings, like more fundamental feelings, more like a real human feelings, something that people really care, something that timeless, like love, like grief, like joy. I strongly believe that the games will last longer and will be more relevant because they will touch stronger. I want to, as an example, to bring my last project, the project that we were working when I was at E-Line, and that was amazing, transformational project for me because like my previous project were like military games. I enjoy it, I learn a lot, but this project was actually different. The project, we had like a big goal, and the goal was to kind of share and extend the Alaska Native culture with a wide audience and kind of spark the curiosity and share the wisdom of Alaska Native people. And the project was amazing for us as a developers because we travel a lot. We met so many amazing people, writers, storytellers, artists. Like that Sean Wester, the creative director of the project, he met with the elders, interviewed them. Like we talk with the kids in colleges and schools, talk with artists, scientists. We even participate in events like that, like not a very typical game development event, because we were pulling out a huge 40-foot whale out of the ocean It was kind of a crazy experience, but all that was really fun and meaningful. And at the same time, the game did very well. So like, it seems like it's possible to do. The game was downloaded 2.5 million times, and it's released on 6 major platforms. It was a lot of press about this game. We even won BAFTA that we're really proud of. But honestly, the biggest thing is the reception that we received from native community. This is like Vincent Gregory. He's a teacher in Anchorage school, and he said, after playing the game, he said, that's how I wanted to teach kids. And after playing, this game makes me feel happy and proud to be Alaska Native. So hearing that, to me, kind of like answering a lot of questions. It was a hard project, for sure. It was really hard to make, but it was very meaningful. And at the same time, I'm not regretting even 1 second working on the projects like that. And I do believe that the projects like that will last way longer because they touch it differently, people. Thank you.
Dima, moving right along. Now for something completely different, we have Matthew Burns, who has spent most of his years working on many of the same games that Marty has, many in the Halo franchise. He's now the producer at the University of Washington Center for Game Science, and most recently, I and the rest of the game development internet loved Matthew's Twine game, The Writer Will Do Something, which gives you a great look inside the development hell we all live in. Give you Mr. Burns.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to tell a story. It's a story about a game in development called Space Hostilities 3. And more importantly, it's about an enemy character that's being developed for this game called the Mecharaptor. There it is. Mecharaptor just came out of pre-production. Looks really cool. Everyone's excited for it. I mean, look at it. So now we're ready to put the Mecharaptor into full production. Now, this is a team that's made Space Hostilities 1 and 2. So it's not like they don't know what they're doing. They have a process, right? They have a workflow. So they get they start the workflow, and they put things into the production machine, and they have all concept artists, and they have modelers and textures and animators. They have engineers and AI guys, audio guys. Everybody's kind of at the top of their field. They're making everything to the best of their ability, and they're putting it all together. So now we're sort of at the end of the production cycle, and we're ready to put everything together and finally play everything the way it's meant to be played. It doesn't work out. It's not good. What happened? We're at the end of our dev cycle. We've done everything. We put it all together, and it doesn't work. What happened? We had the workflow, and it passed these checkpoints, but now it's failed the last checkpoint. What happened? Well, so some people are like, well, the AI is not that good. And the AI guys are like, come on, I don't have enough CPU to like do the right AI. And other people are like, well, animations aren't that good. And the animators are like, well, you told us we only had 10 frames to make this animation. Plus, you compress our animations anyway. It's not going to look good. And then other people are like, well, the Mecharaptor never really looked that cool anyway. I would reconcept it. And the producer's like, reconcept it? We have like 5 weeks left. We can't reconcept it. Ridiculous. So the team starts flailing around, right? People are like, let's change things. Let's try to fix this, right? So the designer goes in and he changes the movement speed, ends up breaking the walk cycle. And the animator's like, okay, I have to fix the walk cycle now because you changed the movement speed. The modeler tries to tweak the model. I'll make it really cool. I'll just do this thing. Then broke a bunch of cutscenes, because it clips through a bunch of geometry now. A designer and an animator who are good friends, they go to lunch and they're like, we know what to do to fix this. When they go gorilla in a bunch of new stuff into the game to try to make it super cool, they don't tell the audio team. The audio team's like, well, you didn't tell us that these new things were going in. Don't do that to us, right? So everybody's just going, wow, like this on the nice workflow that we worked out. People are stepping on each other's toes. They're stepping on each other's work. They're getting mad at each other. There's just chaos and madness, right? Everybody's just really angry at each other. They're at the office constantly, and it's just a complete mess. This is a completely fictional story, by the way. So what do we do? There are a few things that are obvious that I think people talk a lot about, right, in this situation. There needs to be strong vision for what something is supposed to be. There needs to be trust in the workplace, something that Marty talked about. Those are all true, and I think that those things are great to have. I'm a producer, so I think about what happens when you don't have those things, right? So what I want to say is that when the process has failed, it's already too late to come up with a new strategy. What that means is think about what to do and talk about what to do when the process fails before the process fails. So that means more than just padding the schedule at the end. You don't just add 2 weeks at the end and say, though, this is just extra time, because those 2 weeks will be guaranteed to be just filled with chaos. So what you really want to do is have a failure strategy, and a failure strategy is established and agreed upon in advance of the surprise. It acknowledges that we may fail at something and says that's okay. And it answers the question, how will we respond if the quality of something negatively surprises us? Do we put together a strike team? Do we set up daily review meetings? Do we just live with it? Do we cut it? Think about it now so people don't panic when things go astray, right? So, to return to my story, what happened to the Mecha Raptor? Well, a bunch of people finally got together, they formed a strike team, they moved into an office together, they drove each other absolutely crazy, it was a multidisciplinary team, they were completely at each other's throats, they hated each other, and they worked 24 hours a day, basically. But they got it together, they saved the game shipped, and it was all right, and now that team is hard at work on Space Hostilities 4. Thank you.
Next up, we have John Krajewski. Strangely enough, long ago, John Krajewski programmed some fabulous ladder AI in the Suffering games that we worked on together. Since then, he has worked at Pandemic in Australia before founding his own company, Strange Loop Games, whose first game, Vessel, came out some years ago. Since then, they've changed things up a bit and started working on educational games that are also fun to play. And John just got done showing off his latest game, Eco, at PAX for 4 days, which explains why he is slightly sick now, and which, as of this morning, is 50% over its Kickstarter funding target. Congratulations. I give you John Krajewski.
Hello. All right, so the topic that I want to talk about today is what else games can do beyond entertainment. And this is something that games have kind of tried experimenting with for a long time, and they haven't always succeeded, I would say. And the term educational game itself, I think, has kind of a negative connotation to it. It's something there's kind of a stigma to it. Like, it's not something you would typically play on your own. It's something that, like, you're kind of compelled to play. There's some curriculum goal, or there's some reason beyond, like, why you have to play this game. And I think one of the key reasons for why that happens is because the things you're meant to be learning in these games, like in this case, you're learning arithmetic, is not part of the game mechanics or the theme or anything. It's a separate thing. It's this chore you have to do to get back to the real game, right? And the messaging there is just really key. The messaging is, okay, we know this is boring. Please just do these math problems, and then you can go to the next thing, right? Like, it's this wall separating you, and the mechanics and the theme are not aligned, and that's really kind of counterproductive. It kind of de-educates in a way. And there's been a couple of decades of this. I mean, there have definitely been some impressive educational games out there, but it's gotten to the point where educational games is almost kind of a term beyond repair. I prefer just games, meet people where they are. So in this talk, I wanted to go over our approach and how we're trying to do things differently, seeing what we can do to kind of make games do more than entertainment and make them in a way that both the game players and the educational realm accept that, and they're interested in that, and they embrace it. And the most important thing, as I'm saying, is that mechanics and the learning must be in alignment, that the thing you're doing should be the thing that you're learning about in the game. And pretty much all games already do this, except educational games, which is a really strange thing. Like, the fun of games is you're learning something. You're learning how to, like, have platform skills in Mario, or, whatever. That act of learning at its core, like, is the fun thing. So why do learning games, like, take that out, and it's like this separate thing that you have to do? Like, it seems so completely obvious, but it's really common in just about every educational game. So this is our game, one of our games we did called Sim Cell. So in this game, you're put inside this cell, and you have to, you're given these missions to protect it from viruses and things like that. And in order to do well, you have to develop this understanding of cell biology. And it's not the wall that you have to pass, it's like the medium that you're working in. It's It's the sword, it's the weapon, the tool that gets you to your goal is this kind of fluency in cell biology. So integrating it deeply into the mechanics, I think, is really key to getting educational games to be something more. Another thing that educational games can do, and I think this is something that games just have such an incredible power to do beyond any medium, is give you context, tell you why should I care. You don't really have to tell people to play a good game. You have to tell them to stop, and they don't listen to you, right? Like trying to get kids to stop playing games versus trying to get them to do their homework is a complete battle. Like, I don't think it has to be that way. I think we can have learning be something that, you're so engaged in it that you're wanting more of it. So this is our game called Code Breakers. This is a social algebra game we did. And algebra is probably one of the best examples of a topic that people are like, why should I care about this? This makes no sense and I will never, ever use this. Why are you forcing this on me? And so Code Breakers doesn't teach algebra at all. It just gives a context for it. So in Code Breakers, you're creating these levels to protect your vault. You're creating these puzzles like a security system to surround your vault. And you put your level online, and players have to hack into your security system in order to win a prize, and then they're higher up in the ranks, they have more money, they can build better rooms, there's this economy going. And it basically creates this kind of social structure where algebra becomes this secret skill. Algebra is like the ability to lockpick now. Algebra puts you at the top of this social chain. So what this game does, and it's kind of its sole purpose, is to give algebra this social context, this social meaning, where I'm playing with people I know in my school, I'm interacting with people I know, and this secret skill is going to get me further. I care about this now, and maybe I'm going to seek it out. Or when I'm in math class, I'm going to understand. Okay, this is cool. I can use this to beat Billy's level because it's beat me 6 times, and I hate that guy. So you have this new reason for caring, which is something that games are incredible at doing. So this is a look at our new game, Eco. So Eco is this online world game where you have to build a civilization without destroying the world in the process. So everything you do affects the ecosystem. And it's all based on collaboration. You have to collaborate with people. You have a player-run government where you're making decisions about what you do in this game. Player-run economy where you're trading things, trading skills. And each classroom or group of friends will have their own world. And this world lives or dies based on their decisions. There's this real value, this fragility to it that gives it value. The fact that it can die means you can actually save the world for once, because it's possible to lose it and it'll be deleted. So that ownership is just such a powerful sense, gives you such a powerful sense of meaning. And that shared ownership just amplifies that more. And I think putting things in that kind of context can really increase the value to you for whatever it is you're doing. Just give you this deeper meaning to whatever it is you're learning in these games. So we're trying to connect these two big things that already exist and have existed pretty separately for a long time: education and video games. And I think that really what it needs to happen is that games need to move those a little bit. They need to kind of redefine what education can be. They need to redefine a little bit what you're learning with education. I think knowledge is kind of overrated in education. I have every piece of knowledge I need in my pocket, like a Wikipedia search away, right? That's not the most valuable thing anymore. What is valuable is collaboration and entrepreneurship and empathy and just understanding of each other and being able to self-learn and just putting things into context. And that's something that games are really much better at teaching than anything else, much better at giving to people. So I really see games as pulling education in that direction. And at the same point, learning games can kind of pull games in another direction, that they're not just wasting your time or giving you these very, not very meaningful experiences. They're actually, when you play them, they're doing something for you. You're getting something out of this. It's a much more powerful experience. And we're kind of that bridge between them, but we can be moving them as well. And that's such an exciting time, actually, because this is a point where games can really have an incredible impact on the future of education, the future of how we learn, how we collaborate with each other. And it's just such an awesome time to be a game developer right now. And it's something that it's the hardest part of game development, but it's also the most exciting and interesting one. It's really just this unexplored blue sky. And that's my talk. Thanks a lot.
All
right, we have just one more speaker, and it's me. So this is a talk I originally thought of as really more of a game design talk, but as I was thinking about it, I thought, well, maybe it's kind of about managing your creative team too. So if you'll bear with me, we'll get there in the end. So a little bit of background on this. You know, growing up, my parents don't really play games, don't really like games. My mom, these are the board games we had under the stairs at my house, and my mom would grudgingly play them with me when I would beg her to do that. And I don't think I've ever seen my father play a game in his entire life. That's not to say they weren't interesting people. My dad was the head of the psychology department at Williams College in Western Massachusetts and was like an avid boater his whole life. That was his great passion. And my mom was an anthropologist, and she lived in Africa for a number of years, and she was the head of the anthropology department, and she did weird things like put her newborn son with a skull at an early age. So it's not that my parents aren't interested. I'm not saying that they don't like games as a criticism, but it's just not something they were into. So what could they possibly have taught me about game design? Well, from a very early age, my mom was obsessed with buying me Legos. So she would always get Legos because she thought, well, this is a toy he can really be creative with, and he can build things, and he can do this stuff. So she was very avid about that. And at a young age, I was very fortunate. At 5 years old, I got to go to Legoland, and that was fantastic and had this big imprint on me. And the thing about that was back then, it's not like now where you've got like a Legoland in California and here and there and everywhere. The only Legoland back then was in Denmark, and we didn't have another reason to go to Denmark that I know of. So we got to go to Legoland, and it was really great. So how do I think this applies to games? I see this as we want to give players tools that encourage their creativity, right? We want to give them things that let them build something. It could be as simple as Minecraft, which is sort of a slightly gamified version of a box of Legos. Or you can also think of it like the tech tree in Civilization or something, that you're using your creativity to decide how you want to build the technology for your society, and that has big impacts on how you play that game. Or even a shooter like BioShock with all its different weapon types that you can combine in different ways. That's really letting you be creative in that regard too. So another thing my mother did from a young age was take pictures of me doing everything all the time. She was very avid about that, including all of the stuff I created. So this is a marble run I made in the kitchen out of cardboard. And there over on the right side is me wearing a Hammerhead mask. And I don't know, you probably can't tell, that's Hammerhead from the Cantina in Star Wars. And the thing about that mask is it's terrible, right? It's really not a success as a mask at all. Its structural integrity is bad. I have to hold it up or the whole thing's going to fall off my face. But she took a picture of it because it was really meaningful to me because I had created it, right? So how I think that applies to players is you should record what players do even if it's not that cool, right? You should show that what they're doing is meaningful in some way. So for example, in The Sims, it has this great feature where it creates a scrapbook in the background of these key moments in your life and records them, whether it's getting married or having a kid or turning into a vampire, whatever it is, it's recording it there, and so you can go back and look at it. And a lot of scrapbooks are the same as other players' scrapbooks, except it's meaningful to you because it's the time you did that, so it matters more. Another example is watching replays in racing games. Like I have really personally no interest in watching replays of other people's games, but my own game is really interesting because I can see where I made mistakes or what the choices I made. I get extra invested in that. Or another example you can think of with that is like games that delete all the dead bodies in first-person shooters. That really bothers me because your active creation in a first-person shooter is where you kill all the stuff. And the bodies are the memory of where you killed all the stuff. And when you destroy all that just to get the graphics to be prettier or something, you're sort of erasing my contribution to the game. So I much prefer games like Left 4 Dead that thankfully leave all the bodies right where I left them. The other thing, that maybe most importantly, that my parents did was really embrace the things I was interested in that they did not understand at all. So, for example, comic books. I was super passionate about comic books growing up. My parents really didn't like them, made me spend my own personal money on them and that. But here you can see my dad doing his passion, which is boating, and me holding this comic book as a sun shield. And I'm sort of horrified at this picture because I've rolled the cover of the comic book back and it's out in the sun and it's near water. It's like, oh God, I'm ruining it. Later on, I got into some music that they didn't really care for and grew my hair out. And this is a picture of me at my graduation. And they kind of said that they didn't like this stuff, but they didn't make a big deal out of it, and they just let it go. And if you look carefully at this picture, actually, as we zoom in on the tie, you'll see that this has anthropologically correct skulls on the tie. This is a tie my mom got me. So the other most important thing that I did that they really embraced was I played a ton of video games, and computer games specifically in high school. I was just obsessed with them, and they didn't get this, and I must have spent 40 hours a week playing games, I would estimate. Yeah, and she worked on 3 of these at least. So, so this was something they really let me get really into. Obviously, I still had to do my homework and all this other stuff, but they're like, well, he seems to really love this stuff, so I guess we'll let him do that. And that, sort of started to work out in the long run, and these were the first 2 games I did. Sort of what we would call indie games, even though I did get them published into boxes back then. And at the time when I was doing this, my father really didn't get it. And he told a family friend that, like, I don't know, this video game thing he's doing, it doesn't seem like a good idea. But the great thing was he never told me that at the time. He just let me go and make these things, and we'll see if this is going to work out. And I only heard that years later from that friend who told me, that family friend who told me. So the hard truth here is, that my parents knew, I think, was that your child's life is not your life. It's their own life, and you need to let them live it how they choose to. And I think we should think of our players that way, that as we send them into these, worlds that we're creating, we need to give them chances to make those choices, to not just make gameplay that's press X to not die, but to give them worlds that they can explore and choices that they can make in those. And even more importantly, take, for example, The Sims, right? The Sims is obviously a game with a lot of creative potential for players in it, but what's interesting is, I don't know if you know, when they originally made The Sims, and Will Wright was thinking of it, it was really an architecture simulator. It didn't have the ability to control the Sims in it, and that only came out of some of the focus testing and user research they did, and whenever they tested it, players kept trying to use The Sims, and Will Wright and the team there realized, hey, we should maybe let players do this thing that they seem to want to do all the time, so they completely ended up changing the product, completely ended up changing, how successful that game was, because they listened to what the players wanted to do, even though it wasn't their original plan. I mean, you can think of that in terms of first-person shooters as well. Rocket jumping was not something that was designed into Doom and Quake back then. It was something that emerged out of the systems they had in the game. And some game designers at the time might have said, rocket jumping, well, that wasn't the plan. We should make sure they can't do that. A good game designer looks at that and says, hey, this is something players love doing. Let's let them do it. And obviously, rocket jumping has become a huge part of games now. So the hard truth to learn here is that it's not your game that you're making. It's the player's game. You need to let them, give them tools that encourage their creativity, record what players do, even if it's not that cool. And in the end, let the player be the player that they want to be. Let them create their own course. Let them make the game their own. So, yes, so what was I saying about leading creative teams and how this was related to this? I think you can apply these same 3 lessons as you think of the people on your teams and what you want them to do. You need to invest in tools that encourage your team to be creative. I've been on so many projects where the level editor had these horrible bugs that would waste hours of every level designer's time a day. And eventually, way down the road, a programmer said, oh, I guess I could fix that. And he spends 6 hours and instantly saves months off the schedule. And it's not just that. It's not just getting the game done quicker. It's actually getting the team to a place where they can really make stuff and make it great, right? Because if the tool's constantly getting in your way, you'll get it functional, but you won't get it to great. You need to, respect your team's creative choices, even if they are not your own. So often, I've heard of, and seen, design leads or other creative types who are giving direction to their team and say, hey, go do this thing. They bring it back, and they're like, well, that's not what I would have done, so redo it, right? No, that's bad. As soon as you're doing that, you're sort of saying, well, next time, don't even bother to be creative. You have to look at what they brought and say, well, that's not what I would have done, but given the constraints of the game, it still works. Given, the creative direction overall, it still works. Let's go with that because they're invested in it. The hard truth here is that you need to let each team member chart their own creative destiny on your team. Give them that space. You're creating something cohesive, but you're giving enough space to really let them do their own thing and grow within your team, and then they're going to bring the great work to your project. So, thanks. That's the end of my talk. Thanks to my parents. That is the end of our session.